Phil, you're spending 68.7 billion to take an entire publisher off the table, even though you've already done that with Bethesda, and guess what? It still hasn't worked, has it?
Phil Spencer did this thing where he's apologising, but also blaming someone at the same time. Maybe this is just me, but I'll read you the quote, see what you think.
Go on.
We didn't do a good job early on engaging with Arcane Austin to have really helped them understand what it meant to be part of Xbox and part of first party, and use some of our internal resources to help them and move them along that journey even faster.
Wow.
That sounds to me like
he's throwing them under the bus.
Do you think the same?
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. And also, like, it's still your fault. Like, but he's doing it in a way of like, oh, you didn't help them. Like, absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely. Then he goes on to say, we did a better job with Starfield. Again, nobody should believe it until they're playing the game, but that game was earlier on in production, and it is easier for us to swarm a bunch of people to go and help with some of the technology on our platform and ensure we're going to ship a quality experience there. Aaron, I don't know if you've been quiet for a while because you're sort of steaming, but what is your take on this?
Why do you keep doing this to me, Phil? I feel like week after week I come on this podcast and I just bag on Xbox. Like, no one will believe me. Again, to use the Phil parlance and stances, you shouldn't believe me because, it is what it is. But they just keep dropping the ball. And when I heard this, like, live on the podcast, I was driving back from a magical place called Cheltenham at the time when I was listening to this interview. Yeah, seeing a good friend of mine, actually. Basically, so he says this, and he says something to the effect of people aren't gonna start selling their PS5s or whatever. It's not your job to try and make people want to sell their PS5s. It's your job to try and make people buy Xbox Series X's or consoles. Except, wait a minute, it isn't, because you're not making games for the Xbox, because every game comes to PC anyway. So we've had this conversation with Nathan last week. He literally openly said he's got no reason to buy an Xbox outside of being priced out of buying like a gaming PC, right? So, and the fact that he basically goes on to say that great games aren't enough anymore to win the console wars. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry, if you're not in the business to make great games, to make great exclusives, to give reason to invest in your ecosystem, then you shouldn't be in the business. And there's a theory going around that, Phil's only saying this because he wants to downplay their sort of economic, state in the gaming economy because of the CMA result. And he's been doing the rounds again today, saying that he's not, that the cloud gaming isn't the future, because obviously the CMA very matter-of-factly stated that as the reason as to why they blocked the Activision Blizzard deal. But as soon as if I was an Xbox, I own an Xbox, I am an Xbox Game Pass subscriber. If all I had to get my gaming fix was an Xbox, and I was hearing the head of Xbox say, it's not a priority of us to make great games. And it's like, well, A, you got games in production, so if they're not going to be great, shut the whole thing down. And B, you're in the gaming industry. So, I mean, guys, I just don't know where to even start. I've said my piece on it. I could talk about this endlessly for days. It was just baffling. Imagine if Miyamoto came out and said, let's not bother making great Mario games. Tears of the Kingdom, don't need it.
We're not in the business of making great Mario games.
Let's coast on the potential and ability of third-party games and indies that are keeping, which are keeping the Xbox system afloat, in my opinion. And he also said in that interview, he was like, it's hard to beat Xbox at the moment. And I'm like, yes, it is. And he goes on to throw a bit of shade towards PlayStation because, when you've got PlayStation, securing exclusivity deals and stuff like that. PlayStation excluding exclusivity deals? You're talking Final Fantasy 16, Final Fantasy Remake. Phil, you're spending 68.7 billion to take an entire publisher off the table, even though you've already done that with Bethesda. And guess what? It still hasn't worked, has it? It still hasn't worked. You're trying to buy your way back to being competitive.